A warm hello to some of God's best. That's you. You are on podcast, Always on Bible with Glenda Johns. I really appreciate your subscribing and liking. Thank you. Who did you share this podcast with this week? I'm Glenda Johns, teaching the series A Fresh Look at Revelation Chronologically. As I share this episode 18 with you, it is with some disappointment, for we are told so little by John about the millennial reign. Perhaps there will be more knowledge revealed at the time when the millennium becomes a reality. We have only one verse explaining the millennium, Revelation 26. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall reign with him 1,000 years. To put that in our English, those who are already resurrected before they enter the millennium will never face judgment or death again. Just because the unsaved are not mentioned as entering the millennium in their physical bodies doesn't mean that they won't. So don't believe anyone who tries to tell you that only the saved will enter the millennium. Not so. And scripturally, that's it for the millennium. The responsibilities of the resurrected bride, along with all the righteous, will include for 1,000 years assisting Jesus in the execution of the New World government. While they are doing that, they will be witnessing to the many who are still in human bodies and are lost. We must assume these things based on the little information we have in Revelation. Jesus will reign from David's throne in Jerusalem as prophesied, and he will do so with an iron rod, meaning that sin and disobedience to the law will not be tolerated. We know that there will be lost people still living in their sins, the number of which will be too great to count. So there will be sin, but the governing authorities will run everything as Jesus directs, making certain that no law is broken. The physical earth will have to be cleaned up from the earthquakes, erupted volcanoes, and meteorites. But aside from the mess, it will be very much like the earth we live in today. The other shocking fact that I discovered as I have taught Revelation is that there is not one mention of anyone being saved or converted during this time. If there were, there would have to be a resurrection at the close of the millennium to ready their bodies to live in an immortal environment. But no resurrection is mentioned either. If the unrighteous from the millennium are numbered, then why not the righteous? As we usually emphasize, all wonderful things like the millennium, like the absence of satanic temptation, the false doctrines he conjures up, and the many lies he has perpetrated throughout the past centuries, we must be careful not to make the millennial period into a perfect earth, ridding it of its fallen state. That probably will not happen until Earth's renovation into the, quote, new earth that will happen in the future. Earlier, Jesus told John that Satan must be released at the end of the millennium. That's in Revelation 28. Why is that? Because there are lost people alive at the end of the 1,000 years. And they must be forced into making a decision about Jesus Christ. They have witnessed him reign and rule according to the prophets. Now decision time has arrived for the lost Jews who have for centuries been somewhat justified in rejecting Jesus as Messiah because he did not fulfill the prophecies of sitting on David's throne and ruling the world from Jerusalem during his life on earth. Near the end of the 1,000 years, these Jews are left without excuse. The day arrives when Satan is released. We are not told, but we must attempt to put this story together in some plausible way. I would assume that Satan is delighted to have once again a chance to deceive the unsuspecting people on earth. Have they been warned? Over and over again, for that has been the assignment of the redeemed all around them. For 1,000 years they have been warned of the time to come when Satan would again roam the earth. Talk about God's mercy. Is not another 1,000 years enough to convince everyone alive that there never has been on earth any ruler to compare with King Jesus? Humans, these people are told, are no match for Satan, either then or now. They will be warned then about the return of Satan, just as the lost are being warned today of the return of Jesus Christ. And that brings us to the inevitable, the end of that almost perfect 1,000 years. Satan is released, a spirit world thing, and upon his release he has no body. Now, common sense begs some filling in where Scripture is silent. Satan must seek a body in order to talk to and convince his hearers to believe and follow him. So he conducts a search for one that greatly resembles that of the dead Antichrist. Aha! Of course, he finds an almost perfect one and enters and possesses it. Can you picture him? The victorious one, lifting both hands in victory. He appears proclaiming that he has now raised himself from the dead. He goes forth assuring all the human people that he is the real Messiah, which is easy to believe, for they cannot detect from his appearance that they are not seeing the Antichrist himself. We are not told how much time God gives him, but apparently he doesn't need much. Revelation 17:8 tells us that when he comes up out of the abyss, people will be amazed at the reappearance of the, quote, Antichrist who has died. The Jews are now faced with the choice before them of believing in Jesus to be their true Jewish Messiah, after all, or believing once again that it is the Antichrist. The Jews have had an excuse throughout the centuries following Jesus' death, but now in the millennium they are without one excuse. The unsaved Jews have just had 1,000 years sitting in a front row seat, witnessing the perfect reign of Jesus in Jerusalem. Time has just run out for the rest of the Jews to believe, but it's hard to suddenly lay aside convictions that have been held for centuries. Satan gathers all his followers together in rebellion against the one sitting on the throne in Jerusalem, with the intent once again of overcoming Jesus Christ and taking over the world. Satan never gives up. The number of those whom he manages to convince to follow him is unbelievable. John describes them as numberless as the sand of the seashore in Revelation 28. This enormous gathering by Satan at the end of the millennium is called in Revelation the Battle of Gog and Magog. This is not the one we learned about at the beginning of these podcasts. Unger's Bible Dictionary explains that, quote, Gog and Magog are general terms of evil armies who fight against good. As they gather before the temple in Jerusalem, fire falls down from heaven and consumes every one of them. Satan, because he is not human but an angel, is left again without a body that has just been burned. He is seized, is bound, and thrown immediately into the lake of fire, where the Antichrist and the false prophet are still alive after 1,000 years. Don't miss the fact that resurrected bodies do not burn up and do not die ever. Well, guess what? This ends this episode, but there is much more to come, for we have 3 episodes left of Revelation, and you can't afford to miss it. Now, before you leave, click on the subscribe and like. And when you share with someone, guide them to listen to this entire series, A Fresh Look at Revelation by Glenda Johns, beginning with the first episode.